Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. More work for Trevor. This is Trevor. I'm a handyman in Central Florida, and here's a ceiling I'm about to repair or go over. Excuse me, with some tongue and groove pine. Then I'm going to faux paint and give it that kind of distressed whitewash look. And here's some that I've already started. Just trying to get a feel for how I want this to look. The more texture it has naturally with the wood, so what I mean by that is the more unsmooth it is, the better. And here's a little short clip, a little tutorial on how I got that effect. Alright, so I've got some paint here. This is a paint and primer enamel. Probably not a big deal on the sheen. You can probably get whatever sheen you're comfortable with. If you want, of course, if you want low sheen, you can get flat, which is probably more popular for this look. But you could probably get, satin or eggshell as well. So I just got a regular old brush here. It doesn't have to be brand new. Load it up with a little bit of paint and just make a nice hard streak. Now, the more strokes you put into this, the more coverage you're going to get. So you can actually load your brush up pretty heavy and just do a nice good streak, and you can see how that turns out. And you just kind of dry brush the rest, and the more you dry brush, the more it blends in, and the the more you get like a medium load and just one hard streak and or brush stroke, and it kind of leaves you with the most openness, the most space in between the paint. But yeah, it's not hard. Don't be afraid to just go at it and adjust your technique as you see fit. You can go dry, you can go fairly wet. It's kind of just in the technique that you use when you're putting it down, and it depends on the texture of the board as well. And if you wanted this to be more blended in, you could come back while it's wet, or you can mix your paint 50-50, half paint, half water, and you would just rub that in there like it was stain, going with the grain of the wood always. And it will be more transparent. But you could also you might be able to get away with just brushing it on if it were watered down, but I would probably use a rag, because even if I were to paint this on as heavy as I could, you'd probably still get some transparency, which would be like a heavy whitewash, just because it's going to take at least 2 coats to cover this. So keep that in mind as well, that if you're looking for a heavy whitewash, you might even be able to go full strength, but if you're not sure, water it down or use a test piece and figure out where you're at and where you want to go with it. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button, subscribe, click on all notifications, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Alright, so here's the time lapse, just kind of doing the same thing I was doing, and as you get to your 4th and 5th and 6th and 10th board and so on, you pretty much have it down. So
this wood is it's pretty smooth. It's pretty flat. There's not a lot of divots or any kind of just a few minor defects in each piece of wood. So you don't get the um, you don't get the easy texture with this. You kind of have to you got to load up the brush and kind of just push hard and drag it pretty fast and pretty deliberately, and you'll see that it kind of leaves a streak, so the paint just doesn't um, kind of lay out in one big glob. It kind of streaks a little bit, so you kind of want to use that technique, just because this wood is just so smooth. Now if it were like rough cut, it'd be a lot easier to achieve that nice kind of rugged effect, and at the same time, I guess well, the rough stuff, the rough stuff is going to remain rough. So I guess it's up to your personal taste and whatever you can find at the store that you want to work with. So here I'm going back and I'm kind of just selecting a few spots in each piece of board that I want to be almost completely opaque white, and kind of let the there's a couple spots on the boards. There's a solid part, and then there's kind of a streaky part where you can see more of the wood grain, and then it'll become more solid. So I'm kind of just using a little bit of variation in each board and going heavy paint, streaky, heavy paint, so that way it has a bit of randomness and a bit of character. Okay, so at this point I am building my scaffolding. This ceiling here is, I believe it's 16 foot to the bottom of the ceiling. So yeah, I believe eight. No, maybe I'm sorry. Maybe it was about 14 or 15. Because I remember it being about almost 8 feet up. Would give me just a few inches above my head, which is pretty ideal. I did make the mistake of I built my own walkboard, which was a 2x4 on edge and plywood. I forgot to subtract that from the total height at the beginning. So actually, by the time I built all this and I got up to the top, I had to duck my head a little bit. So after doing that for about 30 minutes, I decided that was not going to work. So I had to adjust things and kind of cut the legs down a little bit. And also, I did assume that the trusses were oriented a certain way, and upon further investigation, they were running the opposite way that I thought they would be. And I guess I just really wasn't paying much attention to that. So this scaffolding here ended up being about half as wide as what you see. And of course I had to turn it kind of like if you were going in the door there. So at this point, I'm painting this in the sun. Well, it was kind of sunny half the day and kind of shady the other half, but it was pretty warm. It's in the 80s, so it doesn't take long for this stuff to dry. And I'm just spraying on a clear satin coat, a clear coat. I think it was Minwax that I used. Water-based, low VOCs, doesn't smell real bad. I did end up putting on a respirator because it was, just that amount of spraying is just not good to breathe it in. So. So here's the process of me kind of completing the walking plank. This was like 16-foot long lumber, just two 2x4s, and 3/4 inch plywood, plenty of screws down through the plywood into the 2x4s, that way to give me this, not only the strength of the 2x4s on edge, but the strength of the plywood also holding on to the 2x4s. So if the span was bigger than 8 foot, as you can see here, I kind of have a support every 8 foot. You might want to brace it a little better, but that was more than enough for me, and for the 8 foot bracing. Yeah, you just want to be safe. You could use, I've seen people use 2x12s and this and that, but I figured this was, I was going to be up here for a while, and it is pretty high. I mean, it's not that high, but it's high enough, so I wanted it to be safe and usable, and it worked out pretty well. So here's the kind of the finished product. Could have been built a little bit better, but sometimes when you're doing it by yourself, you kind of just slap it together. And what sucks is I did have to spend a little more time and basically change everything that I had there. So here's the process where I start to figure out that nothing is running the way I think it is. So if you've never used this tongue and groove pine, basically the installation is similar in theory kind of to putting together like laminate flooring, except you have to do it over your head, which makes it that much more difficult. You would think that the installation of this is pretty easy, but it's actually more difficult than flooring, which isn't too hard, but it can be exhausting, and especially in this case where basically I'm 8 feet off of the floor, so I kind of had to do all of my cutting and everything up on the scaffolding, just so I didn't have to make 1,000 trips up and down a ladder. So at first I was using a scrap piece of tongue and groove, and I was using that as a tamping block to use with the hammer, and I quickly switched over to just a rubber mallet. It would have definitely helped to wear a pouch with this, although I do refuse in most cases because I was a framer and I had to wear one for years, and I just don't enjoy it. So on the ceiling, the trusses are running this way here, so I cut a little access hole there so I could just kind of confirm, peek my head in there and see what's going on. So probably got a truss or deadwood here, truss or deadwood along here, And then on 2-foot intervals, we have the trusses, starting from this way and going back. So basically what I'm doing is I got a random pattern here, using liquid nails on the back of each piece. And I'm not concerned with breaking each one directly on a truss, because as long as I have a piece before and after that, that's where the seams are not lined up, should be plenty of support. And I'm also using 16 gauge finish nails, 2-inch, so that should be more than enough to secure it, that and the liquid nails. So I will say, if you just kind of crown, not exactly crown, but if you just put your eye down your board, and just, the areas where, like in this one, I'm using almost a full length. Actually, this one I am using an 8-foot piece. These come in 8 or 12. I decided to use 8 since it's just kind of a solo project. If you make sure that you're using a straighter piece for the whole ones that you're using, because some of these can, if they're crooked, can give you a pretty rough time going in. And I had a few pieces that took several minutes and several tries to actually get them into place. So if you just make sure you're using straight lumber for those longer pieces, it'll save you quite a bit of hassle. So basically this kind of random staggered method, that's the same thing I use for kind of the plank flooring, tile or laminate. I like it just random, and I like for things to not line up, and if they do line up, then there's got to be at least several rows in between, so that way they truly look random. And also another tip, if you're having trouble getting a piece in there, if you just start with one side or the other and get that piece kind of locked in on one side, and try to tamp your way down. And sometimes you have to just use your perception and try and figure out where the board is getting hung up. Sometimes it can be, if you got a seam in the middle of that board, oftentimes the seams are slightly skewed, and other times it's just the board is warped, and maybe 1 out of 10 times maybe there's something wrong with the tongue and groove, but that's usually not the case. Usually it's just warped somehow, or the piece that's receiving it is warped. So usually it just takes a bit of persuasion, and so that's why I do recommend the rubber mallet. Also, I will say that the the rugged finish on this kind of works to your benefit usually, because if this were a pristine kind of white, perfect finish, clear coat, you may not be able to get away with being rough with the installation process or with the mallet, or if you you have to watch out for scuffing the finished pieces, and you'd have to be a little bit more careful on the installation. So the rugged finish definitely does help in this case and in many projects. Okay, so I was missing just a little bit of footage there for the finish. What I did for the final piece is basically I cut the tongue off and just kind of glued that one. Most of them are glued. Almost all of them are glued. But on this one, on the final piece, I did cut the tongue off and just go for a glue and nail. And with these trim pieces, these are just it's a 1x2, so it's 3/4 inch thick, and it's about 1.5 inches wide, and nothing special. Again, if this were just a pristine, clean, kind of white, glossy finish, I probably would have mitered all the corners, but since it's kind of a rustic look, I didn't do anything special. I just kind of butt the pieces into each other. Also, these walls are a stucco finish, so they're not exactly straight, and I think if you were to try to miter the corners, you'd have a lot of fun trying to get a really nice miter in there, because the stucco is just, nothing is flat. Everything, it's a pretty textured surface as well. So if you're working with that kind of surface, I recommend you do you just butt into each other, as I did here. Okay, so basically with this, I switched over to a 16 gauge 2-inch nail, and one thing you do have to be mindful of is this is only 3/4 inch wide or thick stock, so basically you got about a 1/2 inch that you're nailing through into the tongue and groove ceiling, just because anchoring it to the stucco would be much harder. So try to get your tongue and groove tight to the stucco, so that way you have plenty of substrate to nail to. Okay, and here is the final product. Everything cleaned up. As you can see, it is a pretty tall ceiling, and it did come out really nice. And I definitely do recommend using some type of clear coat sealer, just because it makes it look that much better, and definitely an improvement from the falling down drywall. So here is also the back porch I did. This one actually had furring strips run long ways here that I attached to.